Hi everyone, this is Eric Bond, the founder of Beat the GMAT, and welcome to the Write Like an Expert series. Today we're going to be taking a look at the 2012 and 2013 MBA admissions essay questions for the Kellogg School of Management. Now, if you're new to the Write Like an Expert series, this is actually an annual set of webinars that we put on for the Beat the GMAT community, where we ask top MBA admissions experts to join us live to break down the essay questions for the top MBA programs in the world. And joining us today, we have the great pleasure of being partnering with Veritas Prep. Veritas Prep is synonymous with elite GMAT preparation and elite MBA admissions consulting. I highly recommend that you check out veritasprep.com after this session and learn about their services, as well as check out their many resources that they offer for free to our community. We've been longtime partners with Veritas Prep, and it's a pleasure to host a session with them again today. And for our featured speaker, we have the great pleasure of having Travis Morgan here. So a little bit about Travis. I'm going to let him do his full intro, but I'd just like to highlight a couple things about him. So he is currently the Director of Admissions Consulting at Veritas Prep. He knows quite a bit about Kellogg, being a Kellogg MBA graduate himself. He graduated with distinction from the Kellogg School of Management. He's also a GMAT instructor. In fact, in 2011 was awarded the Worldwide GMAT Instructor of the Year award at Veritas Prep. So he's a guy that is very well-rounded in MBA admissions prep, from the GMAT all the way through the MBA journey and essay writing and so forth. And before he accepted this role as the Director of Admissions Consulting at Veritas, he was a professional journalist as well as an award-winning writer and public speaker. So Travis, it's a real pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for leading today's session. Before I hand it off to Travis, though, I'd like to say a couple words about today's structure. So in a moment, Travis is going to go through his presentation live, walking us through each essay question in this year's Kellogg School of Management application. And after his presentation, Travis is going to stick around to answer your questions live. So if you have a question that you'd like to pose to Travis about Kellogg, feel free to do so. You can enter your question as a new comment on the Kellogg MBA Watch comment wall right here on this page. We'll see your questions coming in, and during the Q&A it'll be a moderated chat. So we're going to publish your questions one by one and have Travis answer as many of your questions as possible during the hour that remains. So thank you guys so much to our Beat the GMAT community for joining us today for this Write Like an Expert series session focused on Kellogg. And Travis, please go ahead and take away.
Eric, thank you. First of all, we're just so pleased to have this partnership with Beat the GMAT. I actually think this Write Like an Expert series is a great resource for people, and I'm happy to contribute. So again, yes, my name is Travis Morgan. I'm a Director of Admissions Consulting for Veritas Prep, and we'll be talking about the Kellogg School of Management. So just a quick agenda, very, very brief, right? You guys know what's coming up. The essays are the main part here, but we're going to go through some quick introductions. Then how you'll be evaluated. And I think this is good context to know what are admissions officers looking for, and what are the contexts that they're seeing it in, so that you can then craft your essays appropriately. Part 3 is going to be the essays themselves and some strategies around those. And then, of course, we have our Q&A chat at the end. So first, just some quick introductions. Again, my name is Travis Morgan. I'm our Director of Admissions Consulting here at Veritas Prep. I started at Veritas Prep as a GMAT instructor and as a head consultant here, and so I know the GMAT very well as well. I'm happy to talk about those topics during our chat session, but not during this webinar. And I am a Kellogg alum myself. So, and not only that, I am a very enthusiastic Kellogg alum. I had a fantastic time when I was at Kellogg. And so just a quick rundown of my experience with Kellogg. When I was there, I worked in the admissions office as a student. I also was an elected officer to the Career Management Center and represented students' voice there at the Career Management Center. I was a member of the Diversity and Inclusion Council, and I also hosted the new student orientation. It's called SIM, Complete Immersion in Management, and it's a 3-week orientation for first-year students. So, and I was the host for that entire 3-week process. And so I'm very familiar with the process of starting business school, the trepidation, how daunting it is, etc. And so I've done that. And then I am also currently a member of our alumni admissions organization as well. So yes, I had a great experience at Kellogg, and I highly recommend that you apply there, and I'm happy to give you all the advice I can to get you in. So let's go into our next part, which is how you will be evaluated, really seeing the application process not just from your own perspective, but from the perspective of an admissions officer and what they're looking for. All right? So here's our admissions officer. They see a sea of applicants, and how do they decide who gets in and who doesn't? What are they looking for? Right? So one thing that they're looking for here is they're trying to build a class with varied backgrounds and experiences. Unlike other professional programs like law school and medical school, dental school, these sorts of things, that primarily focus on statistics alone. Your GMAT score, your MCAT score, your GPA, things like this. If you're going to law school, your LSAT. Admissions officers really do take a much more personal approach, and they want to get a class. They really build it person by person, and they want to build that with varied backgrounds and experiences. So what does that mean for you? That means you need to differentiate yourself from other candidates. A lot of people, come into this process thinking, oh, what is the one thing that an admissions officer is looking for? What's that silver bullet? Like, who's the person who I need to kind of portray, this persona? I do not recommend that approach at all. And when you go to all these events with these admissions officers all around the country, you hear them saying the same thing over and over and over to applicants, and that is, be yourself, right? Be yourself. And of course, then applicants leave the event and don't believe them, thinking, oh, this must be reverse psychology. I should be something better than what myself is. No, you really should try to be yourself and make sure that by the end of that application, they know who you are, right, as a person. How you can do that is to clearly differentiate yourself from other candidates who may have similar backgrounds, right? If you're coming from consulting, if you're coming from banking, if you're coming from industries that send a lot of people into the MBA, you need to ensure that they have an idea of who you are as a person and not just XYZ consultant, etc. Number two, what they're looking for, candidates who fit with the program, right? So this, so on your goals then are going to be to demonstrate fit with the program both culturally and professionally. What do I mean by this? I was actually really surprised. I came from a background that was not your standard MBA background. In fact, I did not know anyone who had gone to get their MBA from a top-tier school, really their MBA at all. And so I went into this process completely blind. And I didn't even really realize just how different the programs are from one another until I had gone and visited. And when I went and visited all the different top-tier programs, I liked them, but for very different reasons. And that was the number one thing that I got from that was, wow, these cultures are very different. And so one thing that you need to recognize is that they're looking, when I interview candidates for the Kellogg School, as an alum, I specifically screen for people who may not fit with the culture very well. And Kellogg is very welcoming, very down-to-earth, not very pompous kind of an environment. People have a lot of fun, but they're also very accomplished. And I look for that in candidates, right? I want to find people who fit with the program. Now, in your application itself, you can show that fit through letting your personality come through in the application. All right. The other thing too is that you want to show that fit professionally, and that means to show clearly that you will be able to achieve your professional goals by going to that program, and that program offers things that perhaps other top-tier MBA programs don't, or maybe not to the same extent, that will enable you to achieve your goals. And you want to be very specific about that. Again, as we get into the essays, we'll see how to do this, but I want to lay this groundwork first. All right, so the third thing that you want to look at is that the admissions officers are looking for candidates with specific attributes, right? They want to find people who will become successful leaders in business school and beyond in their own industries. Honestly, they don't care what industry you're coming from, nor do they care what industry you're going into, as long as you are a potential leader in that industry, right? And so they're looking for that potential. Now, what kinds of things are they looking for? Well, we call them the 4 dimensions of a perfect applicant. And in your application as a whole, the essays and everything else, you want to make sure that you're showing these 4 dimensions, right? Now you say, Travis, wait a minute, you just told me in point number 1 that there is no silver bullet, right? There's no, one ideal candidate that I should just be myself, and that's true, right? But we each have these 4 dimensions that we can emphasize, within our own candidacy, to show how we will become that great leader. So today, what we're going to do is focus on these goals, right? How is it that you can differentiate yourself from other candidates, yet demonstrate fit with the program, and also show balance as a candidate? Okay, so this is our goal. Now you say, well, wait a minute. What are those 4 dimensions of a perfect candidate that I'm supposed to show in my application? Here they are. So you want to show your leadership potential and your leadership experience. You want to show innovation. This is creative problem solving, willing to kind of think outside of the box, right? You want to show your teamwork abilities and your ability to work with others. Let me tell you, at Kellogg, this is especially important. When I was, working in the admissions office and giving student tours to people, they would often ask me questions like, okay, so I know that Kellogg always talks about teamwork, and that it's this collaborative environment. How true is that really, right? And I said, listen, think of as collaborative an environment as you possibly can. And Kellogg is probably much more than that, all right? Even in things like preparing for interviews and recruiting, where this you would think could be very competitive because you're competing against your fellow classmates for internships and jobs coming out of school. I mean, this is like your #1 goal of going to business school, is to come out with a great job. That could be very competitive. But let me tell you, it is incredibly collaborative, and they're looking for that in their candidates, right? Even in the recruiting process, it's a philosophy of a rising tide helps all boats, and we help one another even in their preparation and in their recruiting. So just be aware of that they'll be looking for this especially, in your Kellogg application. Lastly, they'll be looking for a maturity. This is a personal maturity which primarily comes through the interview, just so you know. And every Kellogg candidate is interviewed 100%, as close as they can get to 100%. Some international candidates may have to interview by Skype or by telephone or something, but almost always in person. And they'll be looking for that personal maturity, that you bring this just kind of level of gravitas with you, right? You bring this, a well thought through person, right? But also they look for professional maturity, that you've had an appropriate level of experience to be able to contribute actively in the program. And we'll talk about this in the essays as well. So let me just go back 1 slide and say, remember our goals, right? We want to differentiate ourselves. We want to demonstrate fit with Kellogg, and we want to show balance across these 4 areas of leadership, innovation, teamwork, and maturity. Now, let's see how we do it in the Kellogg essays, all right? So, sorry, 1 note here. I say, okay, well, remember that beyond just the essays, they're looking at you as an entire candidate, right? Every single element of that application that you submit can contribute to these 4 dimensions of a perfect candidate, right? So these are things including your undergraduate transcripts and your GMAT score, your professional experience, community experience, hobbies and extracurriculars, any international and cultural exposure that you may have can all contribute to this. I would also say that your own resume, which would list a lot of these things, is a key element, as well as your recommenders. And please do not forget this part of it, because they absolutely look at how strong those recommendations are from the people who know you best, right? So, and you want to make sure that they are also emphasizing these 4 dimensions, right? Your recommenders. Won't be talking about that in today's webinar. Okay, so let's look at the Kellogg essays one by one. We'll look at some key strategies on how to approach them and key elements that may help you really come out in those essays and be able to express you individually, right? We do not want these kind of cookie cutter essays. So, essay number 1. It says, discuss moments or influences in your personal life that have defined who you are today. I think that this is actually incredibly telling about Kellogg. Just so you are aware, Kellogg has a brand new director of admissions, and she has said, listen, I'm looking for a 360-degree view of the candidate. And it's very interesting to me that look at the very first question they're asking is about your personal life, right? So while most schools start with the why MBA, why this school kind of question, asking about your career goals, Kellogg now starts with the personal, and I think that's very telling about the program, right? That they're looking for, who you are as a person. Now, I'm not saying that the other programs don't look at who you are as a person, because they do, but this is a key attribute of Kellogg. All right. The other thing too is this really does show a little insight into the admissions office, right? And these admissions officers, they really do want to see you as a person and not just simply as a list of statistics, right? And putting you into some sort of a bucket, which they do categorize candidates, but they really do want to see you as a person, and this is so important to come out in those essays. I'll tell you, the number one thing that I see as probably the most, as a detriment to people's overall essays are that they're actually too formal, all right, and that the personality doesn't come through. In fact, one of my consultants, when we were speaking on our kickoff call, was saying, I tell my clients, I give you permission to use contractions, right? It's a slightly, you still want to have that professional decorum, and you still want to show that you can communicate in a business setting in a professional way, but that you can use things like contractions, and that you can really let your personality come through. And and so making sure that that happens, I think, is very clear from this essay number 1. Just also an overall tip for this essay number 1, and then we'll go into a couple of more specific ways of attacking it. Don't feel obligated to have some enormous, momentous occasions in your life. When it says discuss moments or influences in your personal life that have defined who you are today, right? These can be small moments that have shaped who you are. Don't be afraid. So many people feel like, oh, I need to be impressive, right? I need to just wow these admissions officers, and so I need to have some amazing event that just transformed my life, right? If you do have amazing events that transform your life, feel free to talk about them, right? But most of us are normal, ordinary people, right? And so it's okay to discuss small moments in your life and how they've shaped who you've become as a person, and really let just sort of the normal human being come out of this essay, right? So let's now look at, all right, I'm a normal human being. I have not found some vaccine that's going to change the world. I didn't any of this thing. How do I attack this, right? I have sort of 2 competing strategies here, and you're more than welcome to do either one or kind of a hybrid of both, all right? So then strategy number 1 I call pick themes first, right? This is where you really get introspective here and brainstorm kind of elements of your personal profile that define you, right? Something, what is it like? You could even poll your friends and family and say, how do you see me? What are words that describe me? What makes me me, right? Get really introspective and really think, how do you define yourself, right? Once you have this idea, try to pull some very specific things. How about, What are values that define me, right? What are the attitudes that define me? What's my take on life, right? What are the attitudes that have sort of defined the way that I've lived my life, right? Um, what are my priorities? What's my cultural or cross-cultural outlook, right? Do I have empathy for others in certain circumstances, perhaps because of certain moments or influences in my life? What is my approach to challenges and difficulties in my life, right? Not every one of these moments or influences needs to be positive. Now, I don't think you should just have some Debbie Downer essay that has all these horrible things that have happened to you in your life, but you can certainly use things that have been very difficult elements in your life to show your approach to challenges and such, all right? So then say, okay, now let's get introspective and reflect on those moments and influences that made you who you are today, right? So now we say, okay, these are the, sort of my brainstorming of ideas of who I am as a person and what kind of defines me, based on any one of these items that I've mentioned, right? Or a combination of several items. And then say, all right, now let's trace back in my history and figure out what it is that got me, from there to here. What are these moments? What are these influences that I have? And then you can, you only have 500 words, right? So you're not going to have very many. Maybe 3, something like this. If you tell very, very, very short stories, you might have some more, but they might have less impact, right? So 500 words is a very short essay, and so I think being very clear on what those moments are and how they have defined you is very important as you're writing here. Okay. Strategy number 2 is to pick the stories first. Okay. So if you have some compelling life stories that you say, oh, I definitely want to include this in here. An example from my life might be, right, that I lived in Japan and served my church mission in Japan for 2 years of my life, from the age of 19 to 21. Can you imagine that would be a very defining moment in who I am? That it may have opened my eyes to how different cultures approach things, especially a culture that comes from a completely different background and a completely way of thinking about things, right? I can also take that as a theme and then say, okay, well, my experience in Japan was over 2 years, but maybe I can pull out a couple of mini stories along the way to say, oh, like this little moment while I was in Japan, caused me to stop and think and say, oh, wow, people can do things in a very different way, and yet there's no necessarily right or wrong. And this theme I did discuss in my own Kellogg essay when I was applying. So, I talked about my experience and saying how when I first got there, everything seemed just backwards, right? Everything that I had learned, they did the opposite, right? When you go into someone's home in the United States, typically, right, you open their door and the door opens in. In Japan, you open the door and the door opens out. Why? I don't know. Right? Is there a right and is there a wrong? Not necessarily. Right? When you drive on the road in the United States, you drive on the right-hand side of the road. Of course, that means in Japan you drive on the left-hand side of the road. In fact, when you have an emergency, you pick up your phone and you dial in the America 911. Of course, that means in Japan that if you have an emergency, you dial, yes, 119. I am not kidding. It was like everything just seemed backwards to me, and I thought, why do they do everything wrong? Why do they do everything backwards? And I realized, right, that just because a culture is different does not mean that there's a right way and a wrong way. And this really opened up my eyes to understanding, being willing to learn, being willing to, say, oh, wow, perhaps there are some advantages to having a culture that's very different, right? So these stories, if you have compelling life stories, you can pick the story first, all right? But the key is to identify how these experiences have shaped you, right? Again, getting back to those themes or the impact that it had in your life, right? Like, how has it shaped you into the person you are today? Remember, the admissions officers are not looking just for amazing stories, although if you have some amazing stories, that can make it very interesting and can, make it, help them remember who you are as a candidate out of the sea of candidates, right? But the key to this essay is to write about how those experiences have impacted who you are as a person today, right? And making it clear, right, that those are important things in life, right? That those are important things that you can then take with you into business school and beyond, right? So that I think is a you can kind of pick your strategy, or maybe you have one big life story that you say, oh yes, I definitely want to include that. Okay, but then you're not quite sure. Okay, what else might I talk about in my 500 words? Maybe you start thinking about themes instead. I'll give you another quick example, quick, and then I know I've got to move on. Okay, so in a different essay of mine, and remember when I was applying, these are all new essays this year for Kellogg, so when I was applying, the essays were different, but the themes are the same, all right? And so when I was applying to Kellogg, and they asked us to describe ourselves, to our fellow students, right? I thought I wanted to describe myself as enthusiastic. Like, I have an enthusiasm that is contagious, right? And so I started writing my essay. And I said, oh, one thing that people, say about me is that I'm enthusiastic, and that my enthusiasm is contagious, right? I just wrote it out. I thought, that is not all that compelling of a way of saying that, right? Anybody can say that they're enthusiastic, right? Anybody can say, oh, this is who I am and this is what I bring to the table. But I don't want to just tell this to the admissions committee. I want to show them. And I thought to myself, how can I show that I'm enthusiastic to someone on paper, right? And immediately this mini story, right, this moment in my life came in. This was not like some life-changing, huge moment climbing Mount Kilimanjaro or something like this. It was a tiny moment that came to my mind. And I thought, I had a conversation with my friend named Cheryl. And here's what I wrote about that conversation. It's literally a 2-line story. It goes like this. My friend Cheryl has a goal taped to her bathroom mirror that says this: be the most enthusiastic person you know. And she came to me one day and said, Travis, I can't accomplish my goal because you're the most enthusiastic person I know. Right? It's a 2-line story that shows so much more about me than just trying to tell someone, oh, I'm so enthusiastic, right? And so try to find these little moments, right? These little mini stories is what I call them, that you can share in the essay so that the admissions officer gets a glimpse of who you are as a person. Okay, now, what is this essay? What can you possibly do with it? Interestingly, this can show maturity, right? Of the 4 dimensions, you can show maturity by showing your introspection, right? A mature person is one who reflects, right, and understands where their strengths and weaknesses lie, and understands who they are and how they got there, okay? It can also, if you happen to choose stories, you don't have to, but if you happen to choose stories that show your ability to work with others, right, that show your empathy for others, that show your cultural awareness, as I explained in my Japan story, this can show this aspect of teamwork, right? And that you're a person who knows how to work with other people, especially people who are not like you, right? If you're coming from, a major bank, if you're coming from a consulting firm, you're coming from an organization that has a very strong culture, right? You may find that a lot of your coworkers are a lot like yourself, right? And so you have grown accustomed to working with people who are like you, right? They're very accomplished, this sort of thing. So just note that the ability to work with people from a variety of backgrounds, right? From a variety of cultural backgrounds and professional backgrounds is a very important skill to succeeding in business school, and they want to see that, okay? For example, I came from broadcast journalism. Let me tell you, we don't have just like normal sit-down meetings in broadcast journalism. It is literally just shouting across the newsroom of something that we need done. And our deadlines are not measured in days or weeks, but are literally measured in hours, minutes, even seconds, right? That I need to get someone on the air in 30 seconds, something like this, right? So be aware that people are coming from very different backgrounds, and to show this ability can be something that you could do in this essay. All right, and of course, these stories are so personal to you, this does allow you to be able to differentiate yourself from other candidates who may have similar professional backgrounds, right? So let me tell you, if you go and look at this essay and say, okay, discuss moments or influences in my personal life that have defined who I am today, and I think, oh yeah, that moment when I was rated as the top analyst in my group really defined who I am today, I will walk to your house, open up your door, and slap you in the face. Like, that is not a personal story. Like, that is a professional achievement, and don't try to mask them as personal stories. This is supposed to be personal. I don't care if you're living in Europe, I will find a way to walk to your house and slap you in the face. All right, so we want it to be personal, and you can brand yourself using this essay, right? You can be, oh, that guy who, served his mission in Japan, and the guy whose, friend had said he was the most enthusiastic person in the world. Oh yeah, like, he seemed like a really cool guy, right? I mean, these are human beings that are reading these essays, and so you want to make sure that you are differentiating yourself, and that it'll stick in their minds. Okay, I know I'm behind. We got to get moving. Here we go. So, essay number 2. What have been your most significant leadership experiences? All right. What challenges did you face, and what impact did you have? And then they say, this is your opportunity to explain how you think bravely, right? Personally and or professionally. And they've given now, right now they say, oh, this can be either personal or professional, right? This is your opportunity to show balance, right? So if you, I would say you would be remiss from not including anything from your professional career in here, because as we'll see, you may not have a lot of other opportunities. Okay. Now, your application itself, your resume, all need to be focused on these great achievements that you have in your professional life, right? That show that whatever it is you do, you are the best at it, right? And you want to make sure that that is your goal in your resume and whatnot. But this is one place where you can expound on that a little bit. All right. But you also don't want to just be a one-beat drummer, right? It's like, oh, I'm an investment banker, and in my spare time, I also invest in stocks, right? That is a one-dimensional candidate. You want to make sure that you're presenting yourself, that you show balance across your profile, all right? Also, one thing, an important part of this essay is that you want to explain why it is significant to you, right? This is another one where people feel like they need to have kind of like these momentous, amazing things, right? Significant is an important word here, right? It can be significant to you and still be a fairly small moment. Now, of course, you want to show that you are a good, a strong leader, right? And that that these experiences show that leadership skill. But so of course, you want to have that be important to the admissions office, right? And be able to show those skills. But you may want to explain why it's significant to you. My strategy here, and this is nothing that is going to be earth-shattering, but is called the STAR format. Some people call it SAR, S-A-R, because S and T are essentially the exact same thing. All right, but essentially, you want to tell your stories where you are setting up the situation or task so that this person in admissions who may have no idea, right, what background you're coming from or whatever, or they don't have that similar background themselves, can understand what you're talking about, right? But then the key parts of this are going to be the action and the result, right? And the nice thing about this question is they specifically prompt you for these sections of your story, right? What challenges did you face, and what impact did you have, right? In the action, you want to talk about your challenges, and don't make them silly, ridiculous challenges like, oh my gosh, I had to overcome my my perfectionism because I'm so great. Like, no, like, make them real challenges, all right? And then, what impact did you have? They're specifically asking for the result. They're just calling it out, and I love that, okay? So as you're writing your stories, paragraph by paragraph, you can do the whole STAR in a paragraph. It doesn't have to be like this humongous intro and then this whole big thing on your action and your result. Again, probably, to make these really impactful, you may only have 2 stories here. three max, I would say, right? Okay. Then remember, you are the main character of these stories. So make sure that you're writing them from this introspective viewpoint, right? Making sure that you're showing your leadership experience there. Now, one thing that I don't want us to forget is this last part of the essay, because it is important. Under the new dean, Dean Sally Blount, Kellogg has enacted this new kind of tagline to the Kellogg School, which says, "Think bravely." Right? But this is more than, I was thinking, when this first came out, I was like, really? Really? Does a business school need a tagline? Like, it's business school. But she won me over, just so you know. And this actually permeates not just, some sort of marketing scheme or something like this. It permeates the entire organization. That Sally, in hiring professors, in the way that they structure management education, and in their student body, are looking for people who think bravely, right? What does that mean? Right? They're looking for bold, innovative problem solvers who are willing to take calculated risks, okay? And so they are, the part of this Think Bravely is, that Kellogg as a whole and Dean Sally Blount individually is convinced that management education, that you can, develop people who will go out and really will make an impact on the world, right? Who can be impactful, bold, innovative people, right? And that's what this whole Think Bravely encapsulates, right? So please do not ignore this Think Bravely element. And you can even use the words, right? That to me, thinking bravely, blah, 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 or, I go through this story and say, oh, right, I made it through this story, and this was one, I hit this challenge, and it made, this I feel like is an area where I had to think bravely, right? I had to challenge our established thinking. I had to embrace some new way of approaching a problem or a concern, right? And I found creative solutions to that, right? So just be aware that this is the framework that the school is giving you, so don't ignore it. Okay, what can we show in this? Honestly, you can show all across, right? Clearly, you can show leadership because they're specifically asking for it. All right, so showing how you work as a leader, your philosophy, your, are you very, very kind of team-oriented, making sure everyone, almost like a consensus, everyone's on board? Or do you start with a very, very strong, clear vision and you convince people to get on board? These could both be very effective strategies to being a leader, but be a little bit introspective and show that leadership. All right, you can show that they are specifically asking here for your innovation, right, in the Think Bravely portion of it, and also they are, they want to see how you work on it as a team. Leaders need to have people that they lead, and then of course your personal and professional maturity through these experiences. So you can show all of them. Okay, essay number 3. So this is an interesting one. It says, imagine yourself at your Kellogg graduation. What career will you be preparing to enter, and how have the MBA and Kellogg helped you get there, right? So they're putting you, right, about 3 years into the future, okay? You're going to start your program in about a year. Then you'll have 2 years in the program, depending on what program you're in, and then, imagining yourself at graduation. Really, this is, kind of the standard, okay, what are your post-MBA career goals, and why an MBA, and why Kellogg question, but it's with a creative twist. So it's okay to really, write this essay from that perspective, right, of, I'm graduating from Kellogg, it's, look up the graduation date, June 19th, right, and, whatever, and this is the career that I'm going to be preparing to enter. Now, what are they looking for? They are looking for clear, realistic post-MBA career goals, right? Again, this is one where the admissions officers say, be yourself, and people say, when they come to us as admissions consultants, they say, well, what should be my career goals? And I say, well, what are your career goals? Right? Like, what do you want to do post-MBA? And they say, I don't know. I say, okay, now let's do some research and find out, right? Now, do you have to know exactly what you're going to do, like the day you leave, and this is the only option for me? No, right? But you do need to have at least one clear, realistic path that makes sense, given your previous experience, and drawing that straight line into what you want to do in the future, right? So it needs to make sense. It needs to be realistic. It needs to be clear. And if you don't know at this point, they're asking you to figure it out in this question, right? What career will you be preparing to enter? Now, people say, oh, well, I have multiple options, right? That's fine, actually. And when I went into business school, one of my philosophies was I don't want to just artificially close doors, right, that, that may be open to me by getting a top-tier business school education, right? So, and they understand this. No one's going to go back to this essay on graduation day and say, listen here, you didn't do what you wrote in this essay, you don't get to walk in graduation, right? No, of course not, right? But they want to see that you thought it through, okay, and that it makes sense. And let me tell you, people put all sorts of crazy stuff in here, and it is a huge red flag for admissions officers. In fact, the number one thing in our poll of admissions officers, where we said common faux pas of applications, was not having a clear, realistic goal. Okay, got to move. Again, this is saying how have the MBA and Kellogg help you to get to your goals. Please, please do not just copy and paste an essay from another school. Do find search for whatever school, Columbia or something, and every time I see Columbia, I replace the word with Kellogg, right? This is a surefire way to not get in. Okay, it is so obvious to admissions officers when you've done this, where you just sort of recycle essays from other schools, because it's not specific. Okay, they're looking for evidence of careful research of the school. This is a program that is going to cost you over $100,000. Right, just in tuition alone. Then we've got living expenses and all of this. You've got your lost income, right? So we're talking for some people upwards of a $500,000 decision that you're making, and they want to make sure that you've done your due diligence on this. Okay, and so they are expecting you to give very specific things on how Kellogg has helped you to achieve your goals. You're like, okay, well, all business schools on their websites all pretty much say the same thing. Are there particular programs, right, that Kellogg offers that are strengths of the school, right? They say, this is a key strength, right? Are there particular elements of their network, right, that are important to Kellogg, right? The Kellogg network, first of all, is very broad, right? When they do comparisons to other business schools, the top 80% of some other business schools, I won't say which, but you go to 18 top firms, and that same top 80% of people at Kellogg went to, 15 top firms, and at Kellogg went to 180 different firms. Okay, it's a very broad network, and again, because of the people they attract, it's a very friendly and helpful network. That's something that you might mention, right? Again, look at this last bullet point here. Go beyond the classroom. Involvement is key at Kellogg, and this is one place that you can show that. Okay, so you can show, beyond these programs that I think are going to be outstanding for my career goals, I also want to make sure that I get involved in the annual Kellogg marketing competition, because it will enable me to have the, I will have experienced, if you're looking from the perspective of the Kellogg graduation, I will have, had all these different experiential learning opportunities. Right, and so I can get involved in all these different activities, and I can, gain leadership skills that I'm looking for, not just by studying them out of a book or out of a case, but actually utilizing them as a leader while I'm at Kellogg, and be very specific about how you're going to get involved. All right, good. Okay, very quickly, essay number 4. So, what is one interesting or fun fact? One interesting or fun fact would you want your future classmates to know about you? 25 words, right? Okay, here's the bullet points. It's one sentence, basically, right? Do not overthink this. It's supposed to be kind of fun and random, just something fun about you. Again, this can kind of be a branding thing where it's like, oh, that's kind of cool, right? like, don't just repeat some bullet point from your resume. It's already on your resume, right? Unless it's, you just absolutely like, this is the way I want to brand myself. This is the interesting or fun fact I want my future classmates to know about me. Okay. But again, this is a place for you to show that you kind of think bravely, take a risk. Tell something truly unusual about yourself, something kind of fun. It does not have to be this overwrought, crafted thing about yourself, okay? It's supposed to be just something that brings out this human side, and it will be very difficult to screw up your application with this essay, just so you know, all right? You may not want to reveal something horrible about yourself, but other than that, just something fun, light is great. Please don't overthink it. If there's something that you haven't been able to address in your others that you feel like would be, oh wow, help you stand out, that's fine as well. Okay, I just want to mention the optional essay. I'm not really going to give a ton of advice here, but it says, if needed, use this section to briefly describe any extenuating circumstances like unexplained gaps in work experience, choice of recommenders, inconsistent or questionable academic performance, etc. No word limit, all right? It really is optional. People always ask me this. Is the optional essay really optional, or should I just find something to write about? No, more is not necessarily better on admissions applications. It really is optional, and they're being very specific about what they're looking for. Extenuating circumstances, right? They're essentially saying, here's your chance to explain red flags in your application. Okay? If you do have extenuating circumstances, just give a straightforward explanation, but don't make excuses for yourself, right? So don't come across as being, sort of blaming everyone else or whatever, but if there are extenuating circumstances, people have family circumstances, people have personal circumstances that may have affected their performance in undergrad, or maybe even on the GMAT, right, where you can say, okay, I know that my GMAT is below average for Kellogg, but I believe that my undergraduate performance is a much better indicator of how I will perform in school, something like this. And I've always been a very poor standardized test taker, and and I believe that I have other elements of my application that show my true potential, something like this, right? So say. The last bullet point here, you can kind of steer them to other portions of your application that better exemplify your true abilities, right? If your undergrad is low, knock out the GMAT, right? If your GMAT is low, have a strong undergrad. If they're both low, you're in a tough spot, just so you know, all right? And your undergrad's already gone, so you really do need to work on the GMAT side of things, all right? Gaps in work experience, this sort of thing. Listen, a lot of people are coming through this global financial crisis. A lot of people are going to have gaps, all right? So just because you were laid off at your firm in the height of the global financial crisis or something like this is not going to be an automatic, you're out kind of a thing. They're human beings. They understand. In a nutshell, word count has been reduced significantly over previous years. We're seeing this across the board. So you need to be very concise, choose your stories wisely, right? And don't forget the other elements of your application. Essay number 1, get personal. What makes you you, right? Essay number 2, about your leadership experiences. Listen, how do you shine, right? Show me how you're going to stand out among a crowd of very qualified applicants, right? And then, of course, essay number 3, the why MBA and why Kellogg. Be very specific to Kellogg, or they'll see right through it, okay? And then that admissions is looking for a broader 360-degree view of applicants, okay? When we're applying to a job and we, submit our application, it's like 99% of it is just your professional experience, and maybe one little tiny line on the bottom of your resume or something gives something of a personal flair or whatever. It's usually very boring, a resume, right? Admissions to business school is not the same, right? I recommend a 3-to-1 or even 2-to-1 professional to personal ratio in your application. Now, you still want to have professional in there, the resume, all of this, but you can focus a lot more on personal than you're probably accustomed to when you're doing job applications and such, all right? So just remember, they're looking for this whole 360-degree view of who you are. A few little tips here. Tell stories. I've had essays that come into me that sound like a high school report about some other person, right? It's you, right? So tell stories, and feel free to make those, very personal, introspective, and from your own perspective, and that they really give a sense of who you are as a person, right? Use the STAR method, as we talked about. Listen, the mini stories, like that story about my friend who had the goal about being the most enthusiastic person she knew. It was 2 lines long, right? Not every story needs a full intro, a full body, a full conclusion. If you can make a point and have a really nice, like, boom, impactful story in 2 or 3 sentences, that's fine, right? And then just remember, by the end of your application, the admissions officer should get a real sense of who you are as a person. All right, so we're now going to be transitioning into the Q&A in the chat. And just so you know, if we don't get to everything, or you're looking for additional resources, of course, we at Veritas Prep have resources. I'm not sure if you're aware, most people know us as a GMAT company, but we also do admissions consulting. Not only that, we actually have the largest team of admissions consultants in the industry, and I don't think people recognize that, right? And so you can, we have all these different options for you as far as what's available. Just remember, in our comprehensive school package, you don't just get one consultant. You're actually paired with a head consultant who has top-tier admissions experience from a top-tier MBA, and you get a school specialist for every single school to which you apply from from top-tier schools. And so you get we do it as more of a team approach, where you get both the insider perspective from the admissions office, and you get someone who knows that school inside and out, which is unique only to Veritas Prep. We also have these other services, hourly, essay and resume only, and then just our essential guides on the various schools, which have been noted by third party as being the top guides in the industry. And then if you have any other questions that I can't answer in chat, then feel free to reach out to us and we can talk about your candidacy. All right? Okay, Eric, let's. I'm ready for some Q&A, and let's hit it.
Travis, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. For those of you who might have joined us a little bit late, we've been listening to Travis Morgan, who is the Director of Admissions Consulting at Veritas Prep, walk us through his analysis of this year's 2012-2013 Kellogg School of Management MBA application. So right now, we are ready to take your questions. Travis is going to stick around the MBA Watch comment wall for Kellogg and answer your questions live for the remaining hour. So if you have a question that you'd like to pose to Travis, the way that you do that is you can enter your question as a new comment right on the Kellogg MBA Watch comment wall. This is going to be a moderated chat, so we're going to see your questions coming in, and we'll publish the questions one by one and have Travis answer as many of those questions as possible during the remaining hour. Just a heads up though, there's going to be no audio or video for this Q&A. It's just going to be pure chat through the MBA Watch comment wall. So again, I just want to extend a huge thank you to our friends at Veritas Prep for co-hosting today's session. A huge thank you also to Travis Morgan for that wonderful presentation on this year's Kellogg MBA application essay questions. And also the biggest thank you for you guys, to our Beat the GMAT community, for joining us this evening and being a part of the Write Like an Expert series. So with that, we're going to conclude the presentations and the audio and video right now. And let's take your questions live right now.